I'm Dr. Brett Lehman, by the way, and I'm an assistant professor of sociology at AUM. We can introduce the rest of the panel also as we get warmed up here and ready to go. I think the order that we're going to go in is after I speak, then we should have Roy. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dr. Ognithra Roy Chaudhary, and I am an assistant professor with the economics department.
Then next we'll have Eric, I believe.
Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Sterling, professor in the English department.
Next will be David.
Yeah, I'm David Hughes, assistant professor in the political science department.
And then our last presentation will be Naomi.
I'm Naomi Slip. I'm an associate professor of art history in the fine arts department.
And so for everybody here, we also wanted to just mention the rest of the program and what's coming up next. And so today is Friday, of course, and then our next panel on Monday will also be moderated by Roy, and that'll be some student presentations. And as you see there, we're going through Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday next week with lots of other good events and interesting presentations. But for now, I guess it's my turn to get started and present a little bit of information on just thinking about if you're potentially a little bit more career focused and thinking that you might want to be in the job market after graduation. I know that from some of my students that I've talked to and just getting the general feel of students at AUM, when you're getting ready to graduate and go on the job market, that's always a little bit of an anxiety producing experience anyway. But especially now that so much in society has changed and so much in the job market and the economy has changed with COVID, I know that a lot of people are really concerned about that. So what I'm going to bring up is just a little bit of information on things to be a little bit more optimistic about and things to give yourself credit for in terms of a lot of the skills and abilities that we know AUM students are developing. So the website that I'm presenting here is you should all be able to see this now. It's from an organization called the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and this is an organization dedicated to trying to bridge the gap between the economy and the educational sectors, especially for higher education, where of course when you're going through your studies, you might focus a lot on you need to pass your courses, you need to hit your benchmarks, you need to get your degree. But what are we all really learning from from our education? So you probably hear a lot of professors saying that you're not just getting a degree, you're getting an education. And with that in mind, this organization that I think Naomi just shared the link in the chat, and you can also just Google NACE, what is career readiness, and that should pop right up. But it's these set of skills and abilities that I'm going to scroll down here below that especially for you all in this meeting participating in the conference, these are things that you should be able to kind of give yourself a pat on the back about, that through your hard work and efforts in school, you're developing a lot of these skills and a lot of these experiences that are going to help you in the future. Not for just one career, but many different kinds of careers. And so things that businesses, organizations, nonprofits, etc., are looking for. I'll scroll down here to communication skills, for example. Communication skills in terms of writing, in terms of making presentations. Maybe you have a presentation at the Southern Studies Conference, or maybe you've done a presentation in class before. But communication skills, you can click on this and see some of the specific things that fall under communication skills. For example, the third point, communicate in a clear and organized manner so that others can effectively understand. Again, if you're giving a professional presentation to an audience where you're very familiar with your research and what you're presenting, but you're presenting that to maybe an expert or a general audience, that's you really honing and developing your communication skills. Maybe in terms of participating in class discussions or participating in class debates, you're doing active listening, persuasion, influencing skills. And so communication skills are something that you're not going to get a job with that title of communication skills necessarily, but anytime you're dealing with people, anytime you're dealing with having to communicate to an audience, those are things that regardless of what happens in the future, regardless of how uncertain the future is, they're still going to want you to have good writing skills, good speaking skills, listening skills, and those sort of things. Going right along with that, again, when you're studying, when you're doing projects, when you're writing papers, your professors and your courses are asking you to develop critical thinking skills, like making decisions or solving problems using your best judgment, gathering and analyzing information from a diverse set of sources so that you can fully understand that problem. Again, any kind of research projects that you would be doing, you have to make a lot of decisions to set up the research. You have to weigh the costs and benefits of one decision over another, and you're gathering and analyzing a lot of information, prioritizing different steps of the process here in the bullet points, and then later on in the project, summarizing and interpreting data, being aware of any personal biases or other external factors that can impact the outcome of the research. So literally, you're being critical of yourself, as well as critical of the other research that is in your field. You're going to be doing a lot of multitasking. Again, whatever kind of career, whatever kind of job that it is, it's going to be multitasking, making decisions, having to juggle a lot of things, which again, we all know that our students are doing that right now. So give yourself some credit for that, for developing your communication, critical thinking skills, working in teams. I'm not going to go over all of that to save time for everybody else in our panel, but when you do group work, that's really a good way of honing skills that are expected in your future career, whatever that might be. One more area to look at here that our students get a lot of experience in at our campus, especially when we can get back to a lot of in-person interaction. But in many of our courses and in the daily life of going to college, you're learning about multiple cultural perspectives. You're contributing to, and you have the opportunity to contribute to a more inclusive environment with your classmates from many different experiences and backgrounds, cross-cultural interactions, the more that you can be comfortable with interacting with people who are different from you, have different experiences from you. That's a valuable skill in any workplace, because most likely you're going to have those same types of situations when there is important decision making going on, when there are difficult choices and a lot of things to be juggling. So you're already getting a really good head start in those kind of areas too. Now, again, the purpose for just looking at this and bringing this to your attention is that you might be setting up your resume, you might be looking for jobs in the future, and it might not look like there's anything that's directly related to maybe some type of humanities or social science degree, but this is showing you that you do have a lot of skills to bring to the table. The trick is just to link your experiences and your skills to what that job is looking for. And again, they're probably going to be looking for communication, critical thinking, being experienced with issues of equity, inclusion, multicultural environments, leadership skills, teamwork, professionalism, and learning new technologies. We've all been learning new technologies in the past year also. And so again, if you do have a little bit of concern or anxiety over what the future holds, you should still at the very least give yourself some credit for the skills that you've been developing in your education. People really are looking out for those skills. And that's going to be true even if we go through other really major changes in society in the future. So if you have other questions about that, we're going to have time at the end of the session for questions and answers. But for now, we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Roy, and he's going to take it over from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett, for the talk. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I want to know if you guys can see my screen, first of all. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
I can.
Okay, perfect. So the first thing I want to say is that I graduated from grad school in 2018. So I had a relatively recent experience being on the job market, and also a recent experience having to apply to a grad school from, I started out directly from a smaller public university, liberal arts oriented university. And then when I was in my sophomore year, I kind of decided that I wanted to pursue my graduate studies. And so what I want to talk about, I want to use this time to discuss strategies that work for me, and then strategies that I've seen work for other people. Some of them have been my students, either in the job market or when they were interested in applying to grad school. Some of these strategies had to be tweaked a little bit. So I was thinking about using my own experiences as a grad student, an undergrad, and being a recent graduate, being on the market, and just tweak it maybe a little bit. So the first thing you want to do with grad school, the first advice I want to give people, so the way I've ordered this talk is to first give some advice on the grad school side of things, if anybody is interested in that, and then talk about maybe some strategies about being on the job market. So the first thing is that students need to research what schools you're looking at, whether they require a GRE or a GMAT test. And this is important, particularly nowadays, because a lot of universities are actually foregoing the GRE and GMAT requirement because of COVID restrictions. So this can play to your favor to a certain extent if anyone is thinking about grad school for their future, because if you want to research a certain department or a certain program, you first want to see what their admissions criteria looks like. And right now, several universities are actually going away from the GRE or GMAT requirement because many places simply are not able to deliver that. It's an arduous process, but if you start thinking about it early on, you can actually get around the system a little bit and be able to control the process somewhat. You will have to get used to a new level of competition. That is something that nobody told me. I mean, my professors told me that you're going to experience a lot more competition in grad school. And in a way that is good because it allows you to discover how far you can go with your career, but also you have a support system. In most grad schools, you're with other people who are in the same boat. And that's going to be a little bit different when you actually go into the job market side of things. And one of the things that I really learned through experience was that in grad school, you have to be very persistent. And this persistence factor is something that is common even when you're going for a job. In fact, it has to be more so. And I'm going to talk about why that is the case. But the job market, what I really emphasize upon with all my students is that your resume and your cover letter needs to be close to perfect. You need to have your references lined up so that when you apply, the references know, people who are writing you letters, they know that they have to write you letters. So in most cases, what happens is you will be reaching out to a professor, for example, for an advice, or you will be reaching out to your advisor for a letter of recommendation. What needs to happen there is you need to have that talk with the professor and see if the professor is willing to write you a letter or not. So in most cases, the professor is going to say yes, and they will have a written letter ready to go. This is important because when you start applying, when you're on the job market, you're applying to so many places, it becomes a very, very stressful situation, and you don't want to wait on the references letter. So you need to have your cover letter ready to go. You need to have your resume close to perfect. Make sure there isn't any typo or any spelling error or grammar error. You want to make your resume succinct and as precise as possible. The cover letter has to be fine-tuned based on the employer that you're applying for. And what I find useful is that there is a skeleton that you can basically have. And I can share my skeleton if anybody wants. I can put it down in the chat box. And based on that skeleton, you keep the skeleton format consistent and change some of the details. And you use the cover letter to sell yourself as a candidate to the employer, suggesting why the fit between the employer and the worker is going to work out. The next thing you want to really handle is your stress and anxiety level. And this is something that is not going to go away, unfortunately. Everybody goes through that. Being on the job market is very stressful. And right now it is more stressful than usual. What you need to do is you can't get rid of it. What you can do is to be on top of it and not allow it, that stress and anxiety, to stifle you. And I think it comes with practice. You just got to keep on top of that, and it's something you cannot avoid. So be prepared for that, I guess, is what my advice would be. Now, one of the things that will probably be a little bit different because of this pandemic is the virtual nature of a lot of interviews. So in my experience, one of the things that stood out was meetings are probably going to be held virtually more so now, but even once the pandemic is over, meetings will probably be held virtually in many cases. If not in all cases, we should see an increase in the utilization of this medium. So how do you make it work in your favor? The first thing you want to have is a good webcam. You need to have a good webcam. You need to have good technology so that you can actually communicate properly and appear professional. While the meeting is virtual, you need to be prepared for having a conversation that appears a little bit more relaxed. So one of the things I do is that right now I'm staring at my webcam. I have an arrow that I put down in the form of a sticker right above my webcam. So I know that if I'm talking to somebody, I don't look at the picture that is appearing on the screen. I look at the webcam. And this kind of looks nice because what it does is it shows the audience that you are actually a little bit better at handling a virtual meeting. The other thing is lighting. You need to make sure, and right now I'm not exactly sure if my writing is right, but sometimes investing in maybe a little bit of a lighting equipment can actually help. So the interview process, be prepared before you go into the interview. And finally, the last thing is do not stop applying. And this is something that I keep telling every single student of mine and all the people that I know who are right now on the job market, that is apply, apply, apply. Do not stop applying. I mean, you have to apply to hundreds of jobs before you can actually hear back from one. So make sure you don't stop on the application process. It is going to be very mechanical, and it actually thinking about it mechanically makes it better because you don't get attached emotionally to any of the job applications. So keep applying, have a positive attitude, make sure you're on top of your stress management because it is going to be a stressful environment. That's pretty much all I have. You guys can put down any comment or questions that you may have on the chat box, by the way, if you have anything to ask from me.
Great, and thank you very much. And we'll move right on to our next speaker, which is Eric Sterling.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lehman. I want to start by teaching and then go to alternative careers. Some people think that teaching is the only career. Either if you're an English major, either you teach or you're unemployed. That's not the way it works. There are a lot of careers for people with good written and oral communication skills. So teaching is just one career. For instance, if you go to graduate school and you have 18 graduate hours in a field, English or any other field, you can teach that field at a community college. And those are wonderful opportunities. One thing that frustrates some people is that they look, after they get their master's degree, they look for full-time jobs in community colleges where they don't have any teaching experience. It's very hard to get a job. Usually you have to start part-time for them to get to know you, then you can move into full-time teaching. Also, I think community colleges could be a good place to work at because Joe Biden recently said that he's going to make community college free. So that means there's going to be a lot more people going to community colleges. So there'll be a larger job market for community colleges. Also, there's ESL teaching. English is a second language. There are lots of opportunities, not just for teaching ESL in the United States, but China, Japan, Thailand, Singapore, other countries. And there's also ESL tutoring. I know some people who do that and they're making good money. They use their computer to work with people. Like, let's say someone comes from Korea to the Hyundai plant. They want their child to learn English. You can make over $20 an hour just on your computer, just tutoring one-on-one or two-on-one. And one thing that's important to realize is that in a tough job market, a lot of times it's not enough to have just one skill. I think it's good to combine skills. One thing that some people have found lucrative is to have a bachelor's degree in English and then get an MBA. So you have the communication skills and then you have the business knowledge as well. For instance, people do freelance workshops. They used to go to businesses. Now it's more online through Zoom because of the pandemic. But there are a lot of businesses that like their employees, but don't like their employees' writing skills. And if you've ever received a letter in the mail from a business and you say, I really like this business, but I can't believe this writing. There are a lot of companies that want to hire people who can freelance and teach their employees how to write better, because otherwise, because this is what do you know about a company when they send you a letter? You go, this is the kind of person they're hiring. You want someone who can write effectively. And also English skills with business can lead to jobs in marketing, advertising, public relations, human resources, project management, things like that. So you don't have to have a degree in business to necessarily get those jobs. There are people who have degrees in other fields with an English degree. And my former department chair, Alan Gribben, his daughter has a bachelor's degree in English but took some science courses, and then she went on to UAB's medical school. So you can, as long as you have the requisite science classes, you can get into medical school or law school. Actually, English is, I think, a very good law school, very good for law school. What do you do in English classes? You form a thesis, and then you support it. That's what you do in a courtroom. You have your idea, and then you try to support it. That's what you do in a courtroom. So English is a very, very good major for law school because you're presenting an argument, you're supporting an argument. And also internships. I hope that some of you are thinking about internships. That's a good way of getting some practical experience. And you can learn a lot about a potential field. I've placed people like in publishing houses like New South Bookstore, which is in South Court Street, and they've loved the experience and they know what they want to go into publishing or editing. And I placed one person with a law firm. Actually, it was a judge. Her name is Tracy McCooey, and he thought Tracy McCooey was just a wonderful person, but he didn't like law. He was about to start studying for the LSAT and to get ready for law school, and then he realized in an internship that's not what I want to do. So an internship could be valuable because it can teach you what you really want to do, but it can also tell you this is what I don't want to do. And it's a lot better to find out if you don't want to go to law school and you don't really like the legal profession, it's a lot better to find out before you take the LSAT and before you get into law school than once you get into it. So again, publishing, editing, also library science. If you're an English major, then you love books and you love to read. And you might also want to help other people find books, what they want to read. And also, if you're an English major, you know about research skills, but like any other major. But some of our English majors want to go into library science afterwards. There are some online programs in case you don't have a library science school near your house. University of Alabama has a very good library science program. So you can get MLS degree, Master of Library Science, after an English degree. I think University of West Alabama also has a good program too. So also owning a bookstore, although that's kind of hard. I don't think they make much business because I think Amazon is really cutting into businesses. You see that even Barnes & Noble has gone out of business in Montgomery. But being a book reviewer, for instance, for Choice reviews a lot of books, or doing film reviews, or also online editing of books. There are a lot of people who write books that are not publishable at the time that they write it because they need someone who's a good editor. Even people who have good writing skills need an editor. Because if you write a book, you might say it's really good and it's ready for publication, but you might be too close to it. You lack the objectivity. Now, of course, you like it, you wrote it, but someone with more objectivity can help you revise it and make it publishable. So there are people who are looking for online editors who they can send a manuscript to and say, can you please read this and help me revise it so I can make it publishable. Also, there are digital opportunities too. There are people writing web content. That's very important. And with all the things on the internet, there are a lot of people looking for web content that's well written. Also journalism. there are a lot of people who go from English into journalism. But one thing I would want to mention is that the style is quite different. We've had some English majors who've gotten jobs at the Montgomery Advertiser, the Montgomery Independent, or the Practical Progress, and they've struggled a little at first. The reason is that in English, you write these really long paragraphs, but in journalism, they like to keep it to 2 or 3 sentences. I'm not sure, maybe they're saying something about the attention span of the readers, I don't know. But journalism is really, the paragraphs are just very short. So the style is a little different. And also in English, your professor will tell you to write in active voice. But a lot of times in journalism, they're asking you to write in passive voice. But if you're interested in journalism, that would be, Advertiser, Independent, Practical Progress. There are a lot of really small newspapers in small towns like Greenville. They're always, or Eufaula, they are looking for people who can write well. Also magazine writing. There's different styles like Montgomery Living magazine. I think it's under, or Southern Living. I think it might be under a different name now. Also in town, there's like RSVP. There's some niche magazines. RSVP is a local magazine that publishes things like things about like weddings, graduations, articles about local people, and they make their money off the advertising. And that's another thing. The creativity that you have in your major can be used for advertising. You could go into advertising. That's another possibility. Also, there's nonprofits, people asking for donations, or people who write newsletters. One nonprofit that I'm familiar with is called Reconnaissance, and that is a release program. It is a program. It's a house here in Montgomery that caters to inmates. When the inmates are released, a lot of times they have no mentors or people who can help them. So this is a reentry program. This is a house downtown Montgomery, that has about like 15 rooms, and they take inmates when they're released from prison, and they help them find a job. They make sure they go to a doctor and they're in good health, and they help make sure that they don't commit crimes. And they're always asking for donations because they need people to help them keep the organization going. So they need people who could write their newsletter, people who could write content on their website. So that's very important. Also, there's grant writing. People writing for grants to help the environment or businesses. And if you become really good at it, then you can do grant writing workshops. Once you start establishing a reputation, someone who can get grants, then you can go into grant writing workshops. And at AUM, we have grant writing workshops. Auburn, we have people who do workshops and teach people who are not familiar with the process how to get involved in that. And there's the Chamber of Commerce. And we had one intern who we placed with the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, and she was English major. They liked her. They felt she was really good at persuasive writing. They put her in marketing, and she did marketing for the Shakespeare Festival. And she did so well that the Chamber of Commerce hired her, because what you're doing is selling the city of Montgomery. You're telling people why they want to tour our city, what it has to offer. The Civil Rights Museum, Rosa Parks Museum, all these things that, we have a lot to offer in the city, but we need people who are able to write skillfully to encourage people to come. So I think I'm sorry, Brad, I think I went over time here. Sorry. But anyway, like fundraising, human resource manager, public relations, social media manager. Now I think I'll just leave it at that since I'm over time. Thank you, Brett.
No, and thank you, Eric. Again, more information about communication skills, critical thinking. Doesn't always sound like the most glamorous type of skills, but just so many areas where we might not necessarily think of right away that that you can use those skills. So thank you very much for that. And our next speaker is going to be David Hughes.
All right, just trying to get some slides loaded up here. 1 second. Can everybody see these? All right, super. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some stuff that Roy touched on a second ago. I'm going to try and complement what Roy had to say. Eric gave you some great information about alternative academic careers. So this talk is really just going to focus on those of you who are interested in maybe pursuing the academic job market in pursuits of either conducting research or doing teaching at a more professional level. Generally speaking, in academia, the job market begins in the late summer, early fall. So when you get to a stage that you think you're about ready to go on the job market, you need to go ahead and start preparing things sometime in the early summer, a few months before it's really time to start sending out applications. You also need to go ahead and choose who your letter writers are going to be. Roy touched on this a second ago, but these they're generally going to be your advisors, your professors, but you want to give them a month or two in advance so that they can write the best letter possible. If you haven't already, and you're a grad student, create a website. There are plenty of platforms like WordPress that allow you to create a free website, or if you want to subscribe and purchase your own URL, that can go for as little as $100 a year. It's really not that overwhelming, but it's a good place to curate your entire academic portfolio. Between you can get your CV on there, you can have a little bio of the kind of research you do, your academic background. You can have links to papers you've written. You can have links to course syllabi, along with, say, lecture slides. It's just I can tell you personally, when I was on the job market, my personal webpage just exploded with traffic because, you apply and it's just much easier, and put a link to it on your CV. It's much easier for somebody to look through your webpage to get a sense of what kind of candidate you're going to be, compared to going through all the materials in the job packet. But I'll get to that job packet in a second. Another thing you should be prepared to think about before you go on the job market is that it can be expensive. A lot of schools will not pay upfront for your costs. Instead, they'll ask you to take on the cost of, say, travel, and then they'll reimburse you later. One thing you might do is ask your home institution for, say, a subscription to something like Interfolio. That can help to lower the cost of being on the job market. But you might just want to be prepared to charge some things to a credit card, and be prepared to make those sorts of purchases with the knowledge that you'll eventually be compensated for them, although some universities can be a little slow doing that. And finally, if you're thinking about going on the job market, really go on the job market. I hear from students all the time that they're thinking about dabbling in the market. Going on the job market is a gargantuan effort in its own right. I would say that when I was a grad student on the job market, that took as much as 20 hours a week of my time, just finding schools that were hiring, getting the packet together, sending that off, creating a user profile for that university if that's what they wanted. It's very time consuming. So I'd really encourage you, if you're going to do it, really jump in with both feet and do it. You can find information about the job market from a number of sources. For academic jobs, the best place really to go is to some professional web association. So I'm a political scientist. The American Political Science Association keeps a list of everyone who's applying. Sometimes some of these associations can be expensive, so they don't always include smaller universities who can't afford to post their jobs on those websites, in which case the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed are good repositories for academic job postings. I would stay away from the job boards that are just generated via web scraping. Indeed does this, along with some others. They're too generic. You're not really going to get good information from those. When you're thinking about where to apply, just know the different kinds of jobs that are available in academia. Everybody wants a tenure track job, but there are also good opportunities that are not, say, adjunct positions. In an ideal world, you don't wind up adjuncting. Sometimes that's just, the case of last resort, but there are postdocs. That can be a different market altogether. A lot of those get posted in the spring, so just keep an eye out for those. You've also got your visiting positions, and these are typically not tenure track, but as sort of a placeholder, it's a good place to build your pipeline of research and teaching experience to ultimately land a tenure track job. My advice to students who are considering adjunct positions is, be careful. When you get into an adjunct position, it can become such a time suck, because oftentimes a university wants you to teach 4 courses per term as an adjunct. Your compensation is not going to be great, and you're going to spend so much time working on those courses that it's going to come at the expense of the other things that are going to help you land a tenure track job, which really that's going to be your research productivity. So an adjuncting position can be a nice fallback in a case of last resort, but I really encourage students to kind of shy away from these things. And Roy mentioned that you should have applications prepared for different kinds of schools, and that's really good advice. I had a template for more teaching-oriented schools. I had a template for more research-oriented schools, and those schools are really looking for different skill sets. And so I will tell you, having sat on a number of search committees, you get the sort of boilerplate application, and it's just really not been tailored to that university, and it shows. So have your templates, but then do spend a little bit of time tailoring those toward the institutions you plan on applying to. When you go on the academic job market, your application consists of what we call a job packet. You've got the cover letter. Generally speaking, this should not be more than 2.5 pages long. You don't want to overwhelm your audience. They're getting, in some cases, hundreds of applications. You need to be succinct in saying why you're a good fit for this job, which really means you need to tailor your cover letter to the ad. When a department puts an advertisement together for a job, they know what they're looking for the most part. And so you want to tailor that cover letter to say why it is you fit the ad. Your CV needs to be up to date and pristine. Good advice on how to organize a CV is put what's most important at the top. So your credentials, those go at the top. If you have publications, put those at the top. And maybe you do some reorganization based upon whether it's a teaching position or a research position. Most schools are going to ask for a teaching statement, a research statement, and increasingly it's the case schools are asking for diversity statements. Your teaching and research statements, again, these should be no more than about 2 pages or so. You don't want to overwhelm your audience. Diversity statements, these were not as common when I was on the market 6 years ago, but I'm increasingly seeing advertisements that ask applicants to reflect upon how they address diversity in the classroom, diversity in the curriculum, and that is something you should take seriously and spend time thinking about as you tailor your job packet to the schools to which you'll be applying. A lot of schools are also going to ask for examples of what you do, sample papers. They might ask for sample syllabi. You should probably go ahead and think about putting some sample syllabi together for courses, even if you haven't taught them yet, but you know that it's a course that you're interested in teaching somewhere down the line. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just gives hires a chance to see what kind of professor would this person be in the classroom, what kinds of assignments do they bring to the table, what sorts of curriculum do they assign to students. And then you want to have references. It is common that you don't see your reference letters. You ask your references to send those in on your behalf so that it's anonymized. Generally speaking, these are going to be your mentors. There are a couple different stages of the interview process. The first is the screening phase. These are typically going to happen over the phone or via Zoom. Practice these. Practice your technology. I can't tell you the number of interviews I've sat on where somebody's microphone didn't work, their video didn't work, and it just comes off as being a little unprofessional. So be prepared and practice. And go ahead and practice some some questions that are likely to be asked. I'm going to provide a link in the chat bar a little afterward that has some sample questions that are frequently asked on the job market. It's tailored to political science, but you can kind of fill in the blanks. And know what you can and can't ask in this preliminary interview. Don't worry about asking about salary yet. You're not at that phase quite yet. You can ask stuff like, what's the standard teaching load? That's good to know. But also don't press the committee too much on, well, what's your process like after this? It just tends to annoy members of the search committee because frankly, they often don't know what the next step is and they don't know what the timetable is. Then you got your fly out, which today it's, as Roy mentioned, it's more likely to be a Zoom out perhaps. These typically take 2 to 3 days. It's really extensive. You're meeting with a lot of people. You're going to meet with professors in the department chair, maybe the dean, maybe a provost. Every single second is part of the interview, including the one-on-ones, but also the meals. People sometimes overlook this and think it's more of an informal setting. This is still part of the interview. You're going to have meals with the committee, and you need to make sure you maintain a level of professionalism at these dinners. And how do you even include some of the things that you order? I've been on search committees before. We took a candidate out at a public university. We can't pay for alcoholic beverages, say. So anything like that, a member of the committee is going to have to pick up that tab, and then somebody orders the most expensive scotch on the menu. I mean, it's just a terrible signal to send to a prospective employer because they're going out of pocket for you. And you got your job talk, and we can talk about that more later, but this really just features your research. There are some things you can negotiate if you are lucky enough to get an offer. Don't be afraid to negotiate things like your salary, the amount of money that they're going to give you for startup expenses like research or travel. Most universities will have an annual travel budget, and you should be well versed of what a standard travel budget is and whether that's negotiable. If it's a school that has a graduate program, be prepared to negotiate for having research or teaching assistants, even if it's not permanent. And be prepared to negotiate for temporary course reductions. A lot of universities will give a temporary course reduction for the first year or two to help jumpstart your research agenda. And then do your research. Know the faculty handbook of the place that you're going to be working at. Understand the tenure application process and what role faculty play in self-governance. Just to reiterate some stuff that others have already mentioned, the academic job market, like any job market, especially right now, is kind of a scary and intimidating place. And so much of it is out of our control. You're going to apply to dozens, perhaps hundreds of job positions. And it's important for your own mental health. Don't take it personally. It's such a random process. You never know exactly why you're maybe getting an interview versus not getting an interview. And your best defense really is just to be as prepared at each stage of the application process as possible. That way you've done your work. And then what's left, you can say that you did all you did, and you let the random element of the job market just be what it is. So I'm going to drop this link into the chat bar. Let's see, I think I've stopped sharing. It provides some excellent resources for those of you on the market, and I see I'm over time, so I will stop and turn it over to the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Always good to conclude on a positive note and reminders that our mental health is definitely a priority that we can't forget either. And so Naomi is going to be our next presenter. And then after that, if there are questions from the audience, a little bit more discussion that we want to have, we'll be able to do that.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me to participate on this panel on career planning. I'm going to keep an eye on my clock here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can prepare now for the job that you want. And the first step is really to figure out what that job might be. I think often when students look at job listings, they get really confused about the titles for different kinds of jobs and what those actually are or what they actually mean. So how do you know what kinds of positions are out there, what the requirements are for those jobs, and what the day-to-day responsibilities might be? How can you tell if you might like that kind of work or prefer something else? There is a way to do career reconnaissance now while you're still completing your degree that is relatively simple, increases your professional networks, and pays high dividends. And that's informational interviews. And it's something that I recommend to a lot of my students. It's a semi-formal meeting that you set up with someone working in the field or at a company that interests you and who you identify and approach. So an informational interview is geared towards learning about the real life experiences of that individual. It's not a job interview. Informational interviews are a really good tool for networking and learning about different kinds of positions in the field that you think you want to go into. They're also a good way to get your name and face out there with individuals who may be interested in mentoring you or connecting you with professional networks. So if you choose people in mid to high level positions within the field, especially in the geographic region where you want to work, you can expand the potential impact of your informational interview. So at its most basic level, informational interviews have a few interrelated goals. One goal for an informational interview is just to leave with firsthand information on the position or the field that that person works in and that you're considering entering. Another outcome is to expand your network and make a good impression on the individual so that if something comes across their desk later and they think it fits with what you've described of your experience, they'll hopefully think of you and send it to you. You should also think of a side benefit then of this experience as acquiring a contact in your potential field that will now be in your network. And if the interview goes well, you can always conclude by asking for 1 to 2 contacts from them of other people that they think you should contact for more informational interviews. So you can kind of set up a chain where you continue to kind of do information gathering. A final outcome of informational interviewing is that it can help you to understand what a career path you're interested in actually looks like, what that specific job entails day to day, and what experiences might be required for actually getting that job. So a lot of students will actually apply to jobs that might be kind of above their experience level because they just don't understand what the correct names are for the positions that might be more entry level with the credentials that they have. You may discover through informational interviewing that you actually don't want to work in that field. You maybe aren't qualified for a particular position title yet, but you can learn what you might do to get there. Or you may hear about another adjacent position in that discipline that interests you even more. So without professional experience in the field, it's often impossible for us to ascertain what the responsibilities are or understand what it takes to get there. And by informational interviewing, you get a better sense of what individual jobs are all about and what you can do to get the job that you want. It is really important to note that although the big picture outcome for career planning should be a successful job placement, you should not treat informational interviewing as a direct path to getting hired. So you don't want to be focused on getting a job out of an informational interview, although that can be one outcome ideally, if done well. It's important to keep focused during an informational interview on getting information about the individual's career path and job responsibilities, and not to treat the interview like a job offer is your only goal. An attitude that prioritizes a job at the end instead of that information gathering will probably turn the person off, which is the opposite of the outcome that you want. So how do you go about having an informational interview? Well, first you want to research specific positions, job titles, institutions or companies, and then seek out those contacts. So you might ask other people already in your networks. You might start searching on LinkedIn. You might ask mentors. And once you've identified a handful of professionals in the field, ideally at different places and with different job titles, you want to reach out and request an informational interview with them using formal email etiquette. You want to keep an informational interview usually to about 30 minutes. You want to make sure that you come prepared for the informational interview. So you're going to do your research about them, their position, their company. You're going to write legitimate, serious questions, and you're going to come with them printed out on a piece of paper. Stick to creating questions that you can't find the answers to on Google. So you want to demonstrate your seriousness, and you might ask questions like, what is a typical day like in your job? What has your career trajectory looked like? Are there other kind of adjacent positions or titles that you think I might be interested in? And you can search for informational interviews online and find lots of lists of potential questions that you might prepare and bring to an informational interview to get you more information. I note I'm coming up on my time here, so I just want to make it clear that you want to be sure that if you do an informational interview, you're serious and you demonstrate that you appreciate the individual's time, advice, and mentorship. The more eager and respectful you are, the more likely they will be to remember you and want to help you in the field. You want to keep it short, and you want to end the interview by sending a follow-up email and then also mailing a handwritten thank you note. You want to maintain that relationship with occasional outreach, but don't badger them. Be sincere in your interactions. Let them know when you graduated. Let them know when you're officially searching for a job. Once you have a job in the field, tell them. Make sure that you're maintaining them as someone in your professional network and not just using them at this kind of one point and then moving forward. So how does this really work? Well, I wanted to conclude by sharing 2 anecdotes from my personal experience with informational interviewing, just to give you a sense of what it looks like. So when I graduated from college, I got an entry-level job at an art museum in Philadelphia, and I knew from the get-go that this position was a starter job, but I took it. I was eager to break into the field. It was at a big institution where I would meet lots of people and gain varied and valuable experience. But again, I knew that it wasn't the job that I wanted to do forever. So I did my research on local cultural and arts institutions and identified some individuals and positions that I wanted to learn about, kind of adjacent fields. And one of them was a public arts and education kind of programming center that did kind of community arts programming. And so I contacted the president of the organization and I asked for an informational interview. And in that 30-minute conversation, the president spoke to me about how they got into their position and shared other organizations local to Philadelphia that I should reach out to and similarly schedule interviews with. The other informational interview that I conducted around the same time was with a senior curator at the art museum where I had just started working, who was able to share their career path to curatorial work. They had a similar background to me, so it was really helpful, and provide me with information about the museum I was working at. And that helped me to understand the additional degrees that I might need or experience I would have to have if I wanted to become a curator, which was another thing I was thinking about. And that conversation ultimately convinced me 2 years later to apply to an MA program and get a graduate degree. So both of those experiences, I think, were really useful to helping me understand the opportunities that I could shape for myself with the degree that I had, and to think about the different kinds of jobs that I could move into and exactly what those jobs looked like or what they were. And I think that's a big thing that you have an opportunity right now to do. But I would also say that just because you get a job, so even if you kind of, you ding the bell, you end up with this employment, that doesn't mean that you should stop preparing for your next career move or considering what you can be doing in your current position to move up and get to where you want to be. And throughout the stages of your career, informational interviewing can be one thing that should be key to your toolbox. I think it can really help at all stages of a career, from initial planning, where you are now, and network building to kind of setting mid and later career goals. So I would encourage you to think about and look into informational interviewing as one set of skills.
Thank you. And yeah, it's always great to hear specific stories like that, and all the stories that have been shared in our session. Just reminds you that there are a lot of different paths that you can take, and there are a lot of different ways to have success. It can definitely happen. You can have success too. So we had a great conversation going on in the chat. If anyone else has other questions that you want to post in the chat, or if you want to unmute and give us your questions, we'd be happy to talk about any other questions that our students have.
Can I just interject a little bit here? So I forgot to mention one thing that I definitely should have mentioned is the academic job market is a little bit different than, let's say, a job market for your particular career or dream job that you're looking for, but there are a lot of like commonalities. So what I would suggest everybody to do is to look for some of these commonalities. Keep applying to jobs. Don't get discouraged when you don't hear something back. And be prepared with your resume, cover letter, and the references. I think that is very common too, regardless what kind of a job you go for, that will constantly be needed. So, and also looking for networks. Do you know somebody who has a job or know somebody who has a job that you would like to have someday? Just having that network around you can also really help a lot, because sometimes you hear things from within your network before they even become available online or in a job site.
networking for sure. I'm sure you've heard it a lot, but it's one of those things that we can't really say we can't really say enough about. Networking can definitely pay off for people. Again, do we have any other questions or?
I would just remind students to use your professors as the front line. You know, I mean, I think oftentimes with grad school applications or the job market, students sometimes overlook coming to their professors first to check in and see about what they should be thinking about. And that should be the first place where I think you go to talk about the associations you should be looking at or what you should expect from applying to grad schools, because they'll have lots of information for you too, specific to your discipline.
I see there's a request for PowerPoints. I'm more than happy to share those. If you just want to drop your email address, or I can give you my email address and you can reach out to me. Yeah. Putting it in the chat now. Yeah, feel free to reach out and I'll be more than happy to share the PowerPoint that I presented. Oh, well, look at that, Roy. That's clever. You just got the PowerPoint in the chat.
Yeah, I put it down in the chat. But I've also shared, I think it is useful for us all to share our email information, because we represent departments and career paths that are so different. Therefore, I think having that information out there, depending upon what you want to do, we might be able to give you some guidance that actually will be very useful for you. So I think it's very good that all of us put down our information and our email in the chat box in case any of the students or people that attended today's session wants to get back to us with any specific questions.
Okay, I think I shared my my PowerPoint. So I'll just give folks a second to.
Yes, you did. I saw that.
Super.
All right, I guess I'll say this is our last call for any other questions or comments. Otherwise, thanks everybody for attending today.
Thanks. I was happy to be here.